Hey guys, tonight we drift back far back, to a time when iron met bone, and vengeance wasn't just personal, it was generational. You're standing in the chill mist of Northumbria, your boots sinking into cold, wet earth. Torches flicker. Around you, illuminating the sharp stones of a pit. Below, a man disheveled, defiant, is about to meet a very unpleasant end. His name is Ragnar Lothbrok, and his story has already turned into legend. You're about to witness how that legend turns into fire. The sky is that bleak English gray that always seems like it's about to rain, but never quite does. King Gla of Northumbria stands above Ragnar, smiling a little too smugly. You can almost hear the internal monologue. Finally got the Viking troublemaker. Ragnar, arms bound, bruised and bloodied from capture, doesn't beg. Instead, he recites verse. Yep, poetry. Because that's the Viking way, die with swagger. He talks of Odin welcoming him to Valhalla, of the feasts he'll attend in the afterlife. But before that, he taunts Gla, calmly, coolly. You're a little impressed, if also kind of horrified. Then come the snakes. Gla's idea of execution isn't quick. A pit of writhing serpents is lowered beneath Ragnar, and he's dropped in. The snakes don't strike immediately. That almost makes it worse. You shift uncomfortably. You know it's not going to be a peaceful passing. Ragnar's voice grows faint. A hiss here. A strike there. His last words? Something like, how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. You blink. Did he just call his sons piglets in the middle of dying? Yes, he did. And it wasn't a whimper. It was a promise. Historians still argue whether the snake pit was real or a poetic invention. Maybe it was a metaphor. Maybe Gla used wolves or knives or just a good old-fashioned axe. But in the sagas, those smoky Icelandic tales handed down for centuries, the snake pit is real. And so is the rage that followed, because back across the sea, in the rugged northlands of Scandinavia, his sons would hear of this, and they wouldn't. Take it well, but not right away. The news takes time to travel, even across Viking networks. Word spreads by sail and tongue, through markets and mead halls. And when it does reach them, you're in a longhouse when the mood shifts. The air seems to thicken. Someone drops a drinking horn. Silence. Bjorn Ironside, broad as a tree and twice as stubborn, clenches his jaw. Sigurd snake in the eye, yes. He actually has a weird eye, just stares into the fire, like he's already imagining something terrible. Vitzer cracks his knuckles. But it's Ivar the Boneless, who barely moves, that you really watch. He doesn't scream, doesn't cry. He just smiles slowly. That kind of unsettling, cold smile people get when their plans begin. A historical fact for your bedtime file: Ragnar Lothbrok may not have been one single man. Scholars think he might be an amalgamation of several Viking leaders. The death in a snake pit story? It comes from multiple sources, some sagas, some church chronicles, none 100% confirmed. But whether he lived exactly as told or not, his death served its purpose, igniting the fury of a generation. In modern terms, you're watching the Viking version of an origin story, and you, unfortunately, are stuck in the middle of it. Already, plans are taking shape. Ships will need building, alliances forged, axes sharpened. Because this isn't just about payback, it's about making the world remember the name Ragnar Lothbrok. The sons will do more than avenge. They'll invade, settle, change the map, and you'll be with them every step of the way. Hope you brought your longboat shoes. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside the longhouse. A cold wind kisses your cheek. Out on the water, a distant horn sounds. Revenge is coming. You're still standing there in the aftermath of silence, the longhouse air heavy with unspoken vengeance. The sons of Ragnar are no longer just Ragnar's boys. They are heirs to a blood oath. And oh, they will take it very seriously. Bjorn. Ironside rises first. His frame casts a giant shadow against the wall as he grips the hilt of his axe, more instinct than thought. He's the kind who speaks less and acts faster. You can tell he's already imagining the crossing, the raids, the screams of retribution echoing through English valleys. Next to him, Hvitserk sharpens a blade slowly, carefully, repeated motions. Not because he needs to, it's already sharp, but because it calms him. He's the wild card, unpredictable, and possibly the most bloodthirsty of the lot. You might not want to bunk too close to him on the ship. Then there's Sigurd, snake in the eye. The quiet one, with a pale blue mark coiled around one iris, hence the name. He's got more patience than the rest, maybe too much. Scholars say the mark might have been real or symbolic. Either way, he's watching, measuring, and, at the center, never standing. But somehow still in command sits Ivar the Boneless. Now, let's clear up something. Boneless doesn't mean floppy or soft. More likely, it was an old term for being double-jointed, or possibly having a disease like osteogenesis imperfecta. Some think it was just an insult turned title. But whatever the case, Ivar is brilliant, brutal, and absolutely terrifying. He speaks, and the room stops breathing. We will go, but not for silver, not for land. For Ragnar. Simple, deadly, chilling. Historians still argue whether these four sons led together equally or whether Ivar dominated from the start. The sagas often contradict each other. Sometimes Bjorn is the leader. Sometimes Hvitserk dies early. Sometimes Ivar lives forever. But for this moment, in this telling, they are united, bound not by love, but by the weight of their father's scream. Across the region, Viking warbands are summoned. Messengers race from fjord to fjord, longboats slice through mist, and you can almost feel the northern world lean in. Not since the days of myth had so many jarls and warriors agreed to fight as one. And these aren't just bearded axe-swingers looking for loot. Among them are berserkers, those infamous madmen who fight in a trance, mouths foaming, feeling no pain. There are shield maidens, too, some riding with the same hunger in their eyes. And old warriors who followed Ragnar himself, coming out of retirement with a muttered, "One last voyage, one fringe tidbit." A later Christian chronicler swore the army included giants. Actual giants. Big guys, sure, but the claim might have come from watching the towering Norsemen next to malnourished monks. Still, imagine waking up from a nap to that misunderstanding. You help load a ship in the harbor. It's sleek, long, carved with the snarling head of a dragon. Every plank seems to hum with anticipation. Sails are unfurled. Armor glints in the morning light. Children wave goodbye. Or maybe they're just glad to see the noise leaving by the dozens, then hundreds, the longboats. Launch from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. You ride low to the sea, mist soaking your face, the cold biting through fur. The oars dip in rhythm, thunk, 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 as if the ships themselves are breathing. You're headed west, toward vengeance. Now, in case you're wondering, Viking, raids weren't new. They'd been happening for decades, hit and run, gold snatch and go tactics. But this is something else. This is no raid. This is an army. A massive, coordinated invasion force, never seen before by the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Later records call it missile here, the Great Heathen Army. That's how terrified the locals were. They didn't even know what to call it. Just big and pagan. As the English huddle behind their thatched defenses, you sail on. The brothers meet in Zealand to finalize their oath. A circle is formed, blood is mixed, and words are spoken in low, fire-lit voices. It's more than ritual. It's legal, sacred. Viking contracts aren't written, they're felt in the bones. Then Ivar outlines his plan. You expect shouting, chaos, but no, it's cold, methodical. Target East Anglia first. Take horses, supplies. Use their kindness against them. He even smiles a little. That same snake pit grin. The other brothers nod. It's time. One more night under the stars. You lie on your back on the ship deck, wrapped in a damp fur cloak. Stars smear across the northern sky. The sea slaps against the hull like a slow drumbeat. Around you, warriors murmur Ragnar's name in their sleep. You don't sleep. Tomorrow, England begins to burn. Dawn breaks not with birdsong, but with the low thump of drums echoing across the water. You wake to mist, your breath frosting the air, and the sound of warriors preparing to storm a kingdom. Ivar the Boneless is already awake, already plotting. Somehow, he never seems to sleep. Maybe he doesn't need to. Maybe his mind is too loud. The English shore appears as a smear on the horizon. This isn't just another target. This is strategy. East Anglia is soft, rural, kind, and, most importantly, rich in horses. You pull into shore alongside hundreds of other longships, their hulls grinding into wet sand like the gnashing of ancient teeth. The army disembarks, not like a horde but like a machine. Shields rise in rows, helmets glint. And right at the front rolls Ivar, seated in a chariot pulled by black horses. The contrast is surreal, his twisted, unmoving legs beneath thick furs and his eyes, bright with fire. Modern scholars have long debated Ivar's condition. Was he paralyzed, hypermobile, or simply a master of psychological warfare, using his deformity to appear like an omen of death? Whatever the truth, his presence commands the army like a cold gust commands a fire. Carefully, but absolutely. The king of East Anglia, Edmund, is caught completely off guard. He's not a warrior king. He's a pious man, devoted to the church, to peace, and, unfortunately for him, to trusting the wrong people. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Edmund reportedly greeted the Vikings with gifts. Horses, food, gold. You know, the please go away and don't murder us package. And at first, it seems to work. The army takes the horses and retreats, but they come back harder, faster, angrier. This is where things get a little gruesome, but we'll keep it bedtime appropriate. Let's just say Edmund's fate involves arrows, lots of them. tied to a tree, refuses to renounce Christ. Stabbed, shot, maybe even beheaded. Depends on which monk you ask. And yes, you read that right. Tied to a tree. It's like they wanted to make a martyr, and they succeeded. He becomes Saint Edmund, patron saint of pandemics, kings, and wolves. Because, according to legend, a wolf guarded his severed head from scavengers. Yes, really. Historians still argue whether the wolf story was spiritual symbolism or just a very weird ... But for the Vikings, it's just step one. Ivar's strategy is clear. Make examples. Terrify, then control. No screaming chaos, just psychological dominance. He uses terror like a craftsman uses a chisel, deliberately, sparingly, and with purpose. The army settles into East Anglia for the winter. You help pitch tents in frosted fields, the ground stiff beneath your boots. Fires flicker. The smell of roasting meat drifts through the air. And yet there's tension. You can feel it. Because something's shifting. The brothers have different visions. Bjorn wants to raid and move. Vitsuk wants to burn and conquer. Sigurd wants to wait. And Ivar, he just watches and calculates. It's during this time you start to notice his methods. Ivar doesn't shout. He whispers. He doesn't threaten. He makes you imagine the consequences. One night, a warrior accuses Ivar of cowardice. Says a cripple shouldn't lead men. By morning, that man is gone. No blood, no screams. Just gone. Some say he ran. Others say Ivar had him flayed. No one dares ask twice. Even his own brothers look at him sideways now. You sit by a fire one night and hear Ivar muttering to himself. Not like madness, more like rehearsal. He's preparing for something bigger. England is just the beginning. Back across the sea, rumors spread of what's happening in East Anglia. The English kingdoms, Mercia, Northumbria, Wessex, begin to kinzer. Panic. They don't know the scale yet. They just know Ragnar's sons are here, and they aren't leaving. And you're starting to feel it too. That chill when you look into Ivar's eyes, the way he never blinks long enough. The way he sketches maps in the dirt while others sleep. One night, he turns to you and says, "You think we're just raiders? We're surgeons." Then he grins. You gulp. The first campaign is a success, brutal, surgical, and completely effective. But now the sons have what they need: horses, fear, momentum. They're ready to move. And the next target? The place where Ragnar breathed his last, where snakes writhed, where blood was promised. Northumbria. The frost hasn't fully lifted when you begin the march north. Horses snort clouds into the morning air, their hooves crunching through hard earth as the Great Heathen Army leaves East Anglia behind. You've barely thawed from the last campaign, and now you're trudging up into the icy wind of Northumbria toward the very pit that swallowed Ragnar Lothbrok. There's no music, no singing. Just the low rumble of boots, hooves, and 1,000 murmured curses as you and the army advance like a glacier slow. Massive, unstoppable. And right there in the heart of it, Ivar, in his chariot again, wrapped in fur, eyes sharper than any blade in the army. He doesn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone is enough to keep men in line. He rides beside his brothers, though even they walk a little to the side, as if keeping distance from a god. They aren't sure they still recognize. The destination is clear. York. Now. York in the 9th century is no tourist destination. It's muddy, walled, and full of panicked citizens with a sudden interest in religion. King Gley rules here, the very same Glea who ordered Ragnar tossed to the snakes. You remember him, don't you? Smug, proud, a bit too pleased with himself. Yeah, you're headed straight for him, but Glea isn't alone. He's teamed up with Osbert, a former rival king. Enemies just last year, they now clutch at each other like drowning men. Historians still argue whether this alliance was tactical brilliance or sheer desperation. Either way, it's too little, too late, because the Great Heathen Army doesn't march like men, it moves like fate. You arrive outside York's walls just before Easter. The city prepares for resurrection. Instead, it gets Ragnarok. The siege is patient, strategic. Ivar's no fan of waste. Scouts report every movement inside the city. Saboteurs light small fires at night to confuse the watch. Tunnels are dug, ladders built. You've seen fast Viking raids before, but this is different. This is war on a new scale. Then the gates fall. And you are inside. The battle is swift and terrifying. Arrows fly like winter rain. Fires bloom on thatched roofs. Screams rise. Then silence. You keep close to the shield wall, trying not to look at what's underfoot. Let's just say York's going to need more than a mop. Glea and Osbert are both captured. They don't even get a final stand. No blaze of glory. Just steel at their throats and the weight of their past closing in. This is where the sagas go full drama. Glea, the Snake Pit King, is brought before Ragnar's sons. Ivar looks at him for a long time, doesn't speak. Just looks, and then? Well, you may have heard the legend, the Blood Eagle. Supposedly, Ivar orders Glea's ribs cut from his spine, lungs pulled out like wings. It's symbolic, yes. Also biologically questionable. Historians debate fiercely whether this execution actually happened, or whether it was a poetic invention. Some say it was misunderstood ritual, others call it flat-out fantasy. But here's the truth you can't shake. Ivar made sure people believed it happened, and that's sometimes more powerful than the act itself. You stand back, shivering as Glea's screams echo off stone, or maybe you only imagine them. The army watches. In silence, no cheering, no celebration. Just grim satisfaction. Ragnar is avenged. Sort of. But now that the fire of vengeance has burned so brightly, something strange happens. It doesn't go out. It spreads. You thought this would be the end, the sons getting their justice, then heading home. But instead, you see new maps being drawn, new routes scouted, new walls built. Because now that Ragnar's death is answered, the sons realize something bigger. They can stay. You camp in the ashes of York. At night, the air still smells like smoke and cooked stone. Ivar speaks to his brothers around the fire. We've tasted English blood. Now we drink the whole cup. Bjorn looks skeptical. He misses the sea, the freedom. Sigurd's unreadable, poking at the fire with a stick. Vitzer grins like a man who's just remembered how fun war is. But you? You realize something chilling. Ragnar's sons didn't just avenge him. They're becoming him. The smoke from York still lingers in your hair as you march south again. The army swelling with fresh confidence and fresh egos. You're beginning to notice it now. The once unified purpose is starting to fray at the edges. The brothers talk less, glance at each other sideways. The war has fed them well, but too much blood can spoil even kinship. Ivar is the one everyone watches, always silent until suddenly not. He rides up and down the lines like a phantom, issuing quiet orders. Every decision is deliberate. He moves pieces like a chess master 3 moves ahead. And it's working. The Great Heathen Army seems invincible until it isn single quotes that the next kingdom in your path is Mercia. Larger, more politically slippery than East Anglia. It's not just swords here, it's politics, treachery, whispers. You arrive to find the landscape stitched with old grudges and broken alliances. King Burgard is technically in charge, but he's about as inspiring as a damp tunic. Instead of fighting, he begs for help from Wessex, of all places. This is the first time you hear that name in a while, and it lands with a certain weight. Wessex, the strong one. The hard nut. Still, for now, Mercia is weak. And that makes it a playground for Ragnar's sons. The Vikings don't just attack. They offer deals. They promise peace in exchange for land or silver, and when they don't get it, they burn everything. The village of Tamworth is one of the first to fall. You pass through its smoking ruins one morning, stepping over melted tools, overturned carts, and the eerie silence of absence. It's not just about soldiers anymore. Civilians are in the crossfire. You glance at Ivar, he's not even looking. He's already thinking about the next town. Now, here's your fringe historical nugget for the night. Some sources claim the Vikings employed psychological warfare long before it was cool. They'd deliberately leave a few survivors from burnt villages to run and spread terror in nearby towns. And it worked. Many settlements simply evacuated before the army even arrived. You begin to see the cracks forming between the brothers. Bjorn is clearly restless. He's grown tired of land and thrones and politics. He wants the sea again, raids, adventure, glory without strategy. Sigurd seems increasingly quiet, distant. Fitzurk, still reckless, volunteers for every brutal raid. And Ivar? Ivar's eyes gleam sharper than ever. He's digging in. Not just literally, but emotionally. He doesn't want to leave. He wants to transform this place. One town at a time. Historians still argue whether Ivar's ambitions included permanent Viking rule or simply a long campaign of terror. But one thing is certain. He begins to act more like a king than a warlord. He starts settling disputes among captured locals, assigning territory, building winter camps. He even allegedly hires local craftsmen to reinforce captured fortresses. Meanwhile, you're stuck in the mud outside one of Mercia's remaining strongholds, swatting flies and sharpening your blade. Days blur. Nights hum with whispered prayers, some to Odin, some to Christ. You can feel the cultural soup bubbling. One strange moment stands out. A Saxon noble, captured and half-starved, is brought to Ivar. The man spits at him, then mutters a Latin prayer. Ivar simply smiles and offers him a seat by the fire. Later, that noble joins the Vikings, trading prayers for a sword. You ask Ivar about it. Fear bends faster than faith. He replies that back in the camp, tensions rise. Bjorn announces he's leaving. He's had enough. He wants to sail south to Francia, to the Mediterranean, maybe even to the Pillars of Hercules. Somewhere not England. There's no grand farewell. Just a few grunts, a brief clasp of forearms, and then he's gone. His longships vanish into the mist like ghosts dotted hits. Differently, watching one of the sons walk away, you realize something else Ragnar's death set in motion, the slow unraveling of his family. Still, the campaign grinds forward. You help build a wooden palisade around a captured Mercian village. Farmers are pressed into labor. Children stare at you with wide, hollow eyes. Hvitserk thinks it's funny. Sigurd doesn't speak anymore. Ivar simply watches. Always watching. Then comes word that King Burgerd has fled. Not to another stronghold, but all the way to Rome. That's right, he ditched his kingdom and went to the Pope. Imagine a king running from an axe so far he ends up in Italy, sweating in golden robes under a painted dome, with Mercia broken. You expect the brothers to celebrate, but Ivar just looks at the map. He's already thinking of Wessex. And somewhere, in a quiet part of that southern kingdom, a boy named Alfred is watching the horizon. The winter wind scrapes across your face as you trudge south again. The army is thinner, now less noisy, more seasoned. Bjorn is gone, but the Great Heathen Army presses forward, pulled by something that feels heavier than revenge now. You're marching toward the last and most dangerous kingdom, Wessex. The landscape changes here. The hills are steeper, the defenses tighter, the people harder. You notice the difference almost immediately. Villagers don't run. They stare, quietly, like they've seen worse and know what's coming. Wessex is ruled by King Tellard, though. His younger brother Alfred, the same Alfred who survived smallpox as a child, who reads Latin scrolls and prays too much for a soldier, is always at his side. You spot him once from afar, on a hill, his face expressionless as the Vikings burn a village in the valley below. He doesn't flinch. Alfred is young, but something in his posture chills you. Not because he's cruel, but because he isn't. That kind of calm can be dangerous. The army reaches Reading in early January, 871. You're tired, wet, and covered in more than just mud. Ivar has ordered a defensive fortress built on the Thames. Speed and precision are everything. You hammer posts into frozen ground alongside grumbling men, but the mood is tense. Everyone knows Wessex is different. And Wessex is ready. 3 days later, a Saxon army attacks the fort. It's messy, desperate, and far bloodier than the raids you've seen before. You fight side by side with Hvitserk, who howls like an animal. Sigurd kills in eerie silence. Ivar, once again, doesn't swing a sword. He simply points, redirects, and watches the bodies pile up. Eventually, the Saxons retreat, but not without causing damage. You've won the day, but it doesn't feel like it. Here's your mainstream fact. This was the Battle of Reading, one of many skirmishes that lit up 871 like firecrackers. Historians call it the year of battles, nearly 10 confrontations. Between the Vikings and the West Saxons, some won, some lost. No one slept much. You push deeper into Wessex. Towns resist. Fields are burned. And still Alfred watches. He's learning, adapting, never giving you the battle you want. He vanishes when you advance, returns when you retreat. You begin to suspect he's not just brave, he's clever. At the Battle of Ashdown, Alfred surprises everyone. He doesn't. Wait for orders. He charges ahead, too fast, too soon, but it works. You're caught off guard. The lines break. You lose friends. Vitzurk takes a wound to the shoulder. Even Ivar seems rattled, his cool exterior cracking for just a moment as the army limps back north to regroup. The retreat is brutal. Mud sucks at your feet. Rain soaks your furs. You hear whispers in the night. Some say the gods have turned against you. Others blame Bjorn's departure. A few mutter about Alfred by name now, like he's not a boy, but a rising storm. Ivar doesn't retreat far. He digs in again, this time at a Roman site in Repton. You arrive there wet, sore, and very aware that something is changing. The monastery is fortified and turned into a Viking winter camp. Its eerie stone crosses stand amid axe-racked trees. Graves are disturbed. Supplies are scarce. Morale dips. You've never seen Vikings so. Bored. Then the digging begins. A curious moment. This, Ivar orders the camp expanded. Ditches are carved. New defenses built. One night, you help unearth something, a large burial chamber. Inside, dozens of skeletons lie in strange positions, arranged around a single massive figure. Some say it's a warrior. Others whisper it's a ritual. This part's real. Archaeologists later uncovered a mass grave at Repton, hundreds of bones, clustered strangely, dated to the Viking occupation. One skeleton stood out huge, mutilated, possibly a chieftain. Was it Ivar? Scholars still argue. But back then, it felt like the ground itself was trying to speak. Ivar remains distant. He doesn't celebrate anymore. He stares at maps and mutters. Wessex hasn't broken. Alfred keeps slipping from his grasp. One night, around a smoky fire, Sigurd finally snaps. This was about father, he growls. Not kingdoms. Not borders. Ivar doesn't look up. Father would have wanted more. No. Sigurd says, you want more. The tension crackles. Vitzurk sits silent, chewing meat like nothing's wrong. You hold your breath. Nothing happens. But something has changed. The brothers are no longer brothers. They're commanders, rivals, men carrying Ragnar's shadow in different directions. And you? You lie awake in your tent that night, staring at the wooden beams overhead, listening to the distant hiss of rain on old stone. The war isn't over. It's evolving. The sons of Ragnar came for revenge. Now, they might just stay for empire. Snowflakes drift lazily over the charred rooftops of York, catching in your hair as you return to the place where Ragnar's blood was avenged, and where the war's next phase will quietly begin. But this time, it isn't the same army, and it isn't the same cause. The brothers regroup here, though not entirely by choice. Wessex has proved more resilient than expected. Alfred, yes, that quiet observer with the calm eyes, has done what no other English leader managed: survive the Viking storm. Not win, not conquer, just survive. But in this game, survival is power. You trudge back through the gates, past familiar rubble and strange new banners. York has changed. It's less battlefield, more base now. There are signs of permanent occupation rebuilt. Roads, Viking homes rising from Saxon foundations. Even merchants hawking salted fish beside captured churches. This isn't just revenge anymore. It's real estate. Ivar and his remaining brothers settle into the city's old Roman walls. which still stands stubbornly despite centuries of wind and war. The contrast is striking, pagan warlords lounging where emperors once walked. You sit on broken marble steps one evening, eating dry bread beside a man in a fur cloak who casually wipes blood off a stolen Bible. Civilization is getting fuzzy. Inside the war council, tension simmers. Ivar wants to press south again to finally take Wessex once and for all. Vitzerk is on board, still nursing a bruised ego from Alfred's last ambush. But Sigurd? He's had enough. This is rot. Sigurd mutters, loud enough for you to hear even through stone walls. We came to burn, not to rule. Historians still argue how unified the Great Heathen Army remained after the first major campaigns. Some accounts show a coordinated force. Others describe a loose confederation fracturing under the weight of its own ambitions. One thing's clear: the brothers are no longer on the same page, and then it happens. One gray morning, Ivar calls for a gathering, and Sigurd does not come. You hear rumors first. A shouting match in the night. A broken sword hilt tossed on Ivar's table. Then the whisper that spreads like spilled mead. Sigurd is dead. No one says how. Some say Ivar ordered it. Others claim it was an accident. Maybe a duel gone wrong. Maybe something colder. But you don't see a body. And Ivar says nothing. Just silence. A quirk of the records. Sigurd's snake in the eye vanishes mysteriously from some sagas after this point. Some say he returned to Denmark. Others say he died in battle. But if you ask the soldiers in York, they'll just look at you, shake their heads, and change the subject. Back in the halls, Ivar sharpens his knives with more intensity now. He speaks little, sleeps less. Vitzerk becomes his shadow still. Brutal, still loyal, but darker somehow. Like grief carved him hollow and rage filled the space. York, meanwhile, continues to shift. You walk past Norsemen haggling over grain, Saxons converting to Odinism, children who speak both languages with equal disdain. You even spot a wedding Viking groom, Saxon bride, and an officiant who clearly has no idea which gods to invoke. It's all chaos, but it's lasting chaos. And Ivar? He sits atop it all, barely blinking. One night, deep in the city's bowels, you follow Ivar to a crypt. Just the two of you. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then finally, I dream of fire, he says softly, but it never burns out. You don't respond. What could you possibly say? This isn't about his father anymore. Not really. It's about something darker, control, legacy, or maybe it's just the only thing he has left. The revenge has been delivered. The thrill has faded. Now he's just a man trying to fill a hole Ragnar left behind and failing. Then come the letters, reports of unrest in other parts of the army. Smaller factions break off, begin raiding independently. Some sail south, others back east. One group heads inland and disappears completely. The army that once moved like a beast now wobbles like a drunk giant. Still, Ivar doesn't leave York, not yet. Instead, he builds. A new hall rises. Pagan festivals return. Saxon traders pay taxes in Norse coin. One fringe detail from an obscure chronicle. Ivar may have declared himself a god at some point, or maybe just acted like one. Either way, no one laughed. You begin to wonder, what happens when a man who lives for revenge gets everything he wants? The answer, it seems, is nothing good, because Ivar has grown restless. He drinks more, trusts less. His health, never perfect, begins to fail. He trembles sometimes. His voice cracks. Some days he doesn't rise at all. You hear whispers of a decision forming. He's going to leave one last campaign. One final blaze before the darkness takes him. You don't know it yet, but you're standing at the edge of an ending, and it's not the one anyone expected. You're awake before the frost melts, packing supplies with numbed fingers and a mind buzzing with unease. Ivar is moving again. The Great Heathen Army, what's left of it, is being pulled south, but the energy feels different this time. Not eager, not bloodthirsty, just hollow. Even Vitsuk is quiet, which is worrying. Usually he's joking, shouting, or setting something on fire. But now he walks beside Ivar with the kind of silent loyalty you see in wolves after the alpha. Starts limping. The truth is, things aren't right. Not in the camp, not with the brothers, not with the army. Ivar still gives orders, but fewer follow them without question. Mercenary leaders now argue openly. New warbands arrive from the North Sea, strangers, glory hunters, men who never knew Ragnar but want a taste of the myth. They bring fresh axes and new arrogance. You see them sizing Ivar up like a man past his prime. And honestly, they might be right. You watch Ivar mount his chariot one morning, slower than usual. His hands tremble. His eyes still burn, but something behind them flickers. Age, illness, or just the weariness of a man who's spent too long turning grief into strategy. Historians still argue whether Ivar the Boneless was sick from the beginning or deteriorated over time. Some accounts describe him as energetic and cruel until his final breath. Others claim he wasted away slowly, like a flame with no fuel left. The Til road leads you toward the kingdom of Wessex again, but this time Alfred is ready. Not just militarily, politically, spiritually, the people trust him now. Not as a king who wins every battle, but as a man who endures. He's built fortresses across the countryside. Not castle burhs, fortified towns with supplies, walls, and loyal men inside. And here's your quirky tidbit of the section. Alfred's burhs were revolutionary. Like an early medieval franchise model, every town had a playbook. If Vikings attacked, the population retreated inside, waited it out, then emerged swinging. It's not glamorous, but it works. You raid a few of them. Nothing sticks. Each time you approach, they close their gates like clockwork. The fields are scorched, the people gone, the loot pathetic, the frustration mounting. Back in camp, the murmurs are louder. Ivar's plan, whatever it is, seems unclear. Even Vitsuk starts pacing more. Some say the gods have abandoned them. Others blame the weather. But deep down, you all know what's happening. The brothers are unraveling. One night, a fight breaks out over spoil, something minor. A silver brooch, maybe a woman. Two captains draw blades. Ivar doesn't stop them. He just watches from the edge of the firelight, expression unreadable. When it's over, he doesn't punish either man. He just turns and leaves. You follow him quietly. He walks to a ridge overlooking the dark woods. For a moment, you think he's praying. But then he speaks. "I see, Father," he says. Every time I close my eyes, but he never says anything. You don't answer. The air is too still for comfort. Another strange thing. More men are deserting. Some sneak off at night. Others leave. Openly, sailing back to Ireland or Francia, even home. The army is no longer great. It's something else now. A shadow of what it was. Still, Ivar pushes forward. A few raids are successful, but small. He burns one church, sacks a minor village, but it's not enough. The Saxons are learning, adapting. And Alfred? He's watching it all, patient, like a man who knows winter will eventually break. His enemy for him. Then it happens. A letter arrives in camp. From Alfred. It's not a peace offering. It's a warning. I will not chase you, it reads, but I will outlast you. The scroll is delivered by a trembling messenger. Ivar reads it in silence, then tosses it into the fire. But you can see the twitch in his jaw. Something inside him cracks that night. He summons the captains, what's left of them, proposes a bold move, another deep strike into Wessex. But this time, few agree. The mood has shifted. There's no energy, no fire. And then a voice from the back speaks up. We followed you for Ragnar. He's gone, and so are your brothers. Silence. Ivar says nothing, just looks. His face is pale, his breath shallow. He turns and wheels away, alone. Later, you see him outside camp, kneeling, not praying, just still. The next morning, he doesn't rise. A healer comes, looks, shrugs. No wounds, no poison, just gone. That's one version. Anyway, another version says Ivar asked to be buried on a hill so that he could strike fear into the Saxons even in death. Some say he ordered his burial place cursed. Others say he died laughing. Historians, still debating, always debating. But the stories agree on one thing. Ivar the Boneless didn't die in battle. He simply stopped. You stand by his burial mound. Low rise of cold earth. Vitzurk places a carved stone at the head, says nothing, walks away. You remain. Listening. And maybe, just maybe, you hear Ragnar's sons grunt one last time. The camp is quieter now. You wake without the familiar rumble of Ivar's chariot wheels or the sound of his voice dissecting maps in the early morning. His burial mound still looms just outside the camp, low, unadorned, strangely humble for a man who once considered himself a god. But maybe that's the final statement. Even Ivar the Boneless couldn't outrun time. Vitzurk remains, but he's not really here. He walks like a shadow of himself, eyes sunken, laughter gone. He drinks more now, sleeps less. You've seen him fall asleep by the fire with his axe in his lap, muttering in Old Norse like he's talking to ghosts. The Great Heathen Army splinters again. Some leaders sail back to Dublin or Jorvik. Others splinter off and raid Welsh territories. A few even march toward the north again, hoping to pick at whatever's left in Scotland. You stay with Vitzurk, partly because you want to, mostly because you're not sure where else you'd go. Still, something odd happens in the vacuum Ivar left behind. The war doesn't end. In fact, in some places, it grows worse. The army fragments. Yes, but smaller warbands become more savage. No one's steering the ship now. There's no more strategy, no more vision of empire, just raids. Just fire. Just hunger. Vitzurk takes command of one of the remaining forces. But he doesn't lead like Ivar. He doesn't command with fear or vision. He just moves, day after day. One foot in front of the other. You march with him through the east. Burn a few hamlets. Sack a monastery. You start noticing things that didn't bother you before: the crying children, the churches filled with ash and broken icons, the fact that the Saxons don't even fight back half the time anymore. They just hide. Or kneel. It's not conquest anymore. It's exhaustion. You wonder, what would Ragnar think, seeing his sons now? Would he smile at the chaos, or frown at what they became? Historians still debate whether Ragnar was ever real or just a composite of many Viking leaders stitched together into one mythic figure. But even as a legend, his ghost feels heavy in this chapter. Hvitserk begins to unravel. You see it in his eyes when he stares too long at a burning farmhouse. You hear it in his voice when he jokes about burying his brother twice, once in the ground and once in memory. He begins fighting recklessly, almost as if he's daring death to come. Take him to and then one day, he simply vanishes. He leaves camp at dawn. No note, no fanfare, just gone. Some say he went east. Others claim he joined a monastery in secret, trying to wash the blood off his hands. One chronicle, a fragment barely legible, suggests he was captured by Alfred's men and later baptized. You stay behind, hoping for word. None comes. Now you're alone. Not entirely, but it feels that way. The camps are thinning. Winter approaches. Supplies dwindle, and then the letters come. From Alfred. Yes, him again. But these aren't taunts. They're offers, truces, land for peace, gold for silence, terms. You're stunned. The same king who once promised only survival now offers diplomacy. It feels strange, almost anticlimactic. But it works. Many Viking leaders accept. Some settle in the Danelaw, the eastern part of England, now riddled with Norse settlements. A place where English and Norse coexist. Awkwardly. And yet, not everyone wants peace. Small groups of diehards refuse. They call the rest traitors. Watered-down warriors. They keep fighting, keep raiding. But their days are numbered. You wander to the edge of one such village one evening. Smoke curls from chimneys. Children laugh in both English and Norse. A woman tends goats while wearing a Thor's hammer and a Christian cross around her neck. The world is changing, and maybe, just maybe, that's what Ragnar always wanted, not just vengeance or blood, but influence. A mark on history. You help build a roof the next day. No swords, no screaming, just wood, nails, sky above. It feels foreign. But not wrong. At night, you still dream of ships, of snow-covered hills, of Ivar's cold eyes and Hvitserk's wild grin, of Sigurd's quiet loyalty and Bjorn's roaring departure. And in those dreams, Ragnar is laughing, not cruelly, but like a man watching his sons finally grow beyond him. You wake to birdsong. Not a war horn, not the barked orders of a commander, just soft, repetitive birdsong, the kind that makes you blink twice because you're not used to it. Peace sounds strange after so much time wrapped in chaos. You're no longer in a war camp, not really. The Great Heathen Army is now scattered across towns and territories, some still bristling with Viking ambition, others slowly turning into farms and trade posts. You're in one of the latter. A small Danelaw village, nestled by a stream, where the fish outnumber soldiers, and the most pressing concern is whether the oats will dry properly before winter. It should feel good. It doesn't, because something's missing. Not just the thrill of conquest, but the identity that came with it. You realize you were never just fighting with Ragnar's sons. You were fighting for something bigger than any one of them. Now they're all gone. You help with carpentry, now mostly roofs, occasionally fences. One day you're asked to help carve a runestone. It's for a man named Eric, who died protecting his sheep from a bear. You think about all the warriors you've seen fall in glorious, blazing death, and yet somehow Eric's story feels more permanent. You pass the evenings listening to stories by the fire. Old men tell tales of Ivar like he was a demon. Others describe Bjorn as a sea god, Sigurd as a ghost, Hvitserk as a wild dog that bit even his own shadow. You don't correct them, because myths always outlast the men they're based on. One night, a traveling skald sings a song about the fall of the heathen army. He gets a few details wrong, because you were there, but you stay quiet. The villagers clap. A child whispers, "Did that really happen?" You nod, but you're not sure which part you're nodding to. Historians still debate how the Great Heathen Army truly ended. Was it a gradual assimilation into the Anglo-Saxon world? A string of quiet defeats? A victory turned into slow decay? There's no final battle to mark the end, just a series of whimpers following a long roar. The Danelaw begins to stretch and settle. Laws are written, some Norse, some Saxon. Hybrid councils emerge, coins minted in both tongues. It's less Viking conquest, more Viking compromise. You see men wearing crucifixes beside wolf-tooth charms. The lines blur. Identity bends. And then there's Alfred. Yes, he's still there, watching, calculating, not as a prince anymore, but a king, a real one. The kind who doesn't swing swords himself but makes sure thousands of others do. He reinforces his burrs, reestablishes the church, even starts teaching literacy in Old English. Imagine that, a world where the pen really does start to beat the sword, and still, Alfred never really defeats the Vikings. He just absorbs them. One letter, now preserved in dusty archives, calls him the West Saxon who turned Viking steel into farming plows. You laugh when you hear that, because it's kind of true. You travel once more to York. It's still rough, still riddled with Viking pride, but it has changed. There's a marketplace now, temples, a school, a blacksmith who hums Christian hymns. While hammering Thor's hammer pendants, you visit Ivar's burial site again. The hill has grown mossy. A child uses it to sled down in the snow. You pause at the top, press your hand to the stone. Fire doesn't always burn out, you murmur. Sometimes it just spreads quietly. There's no reply. Just wind through the trees. Before you leave, you find a small boy staring up at you. He asks, "Were you one of Ragnar's men?" You look at him, then nod. "Yes, I was." He grins, cool. "That's it. Just cool." You walk away smiling, because Ragnar was always more than a man. And now, his legacy, his sons, their fire, their flaws, lives on in stories, in laws, in languages that mix like mead and blood. And in boys who stare at old warriors with stars in their eyes. By now, you barely recognize the England you marched into all those years ago. The land is still green. The river's still winding, but the people have changed, and so have you. You've watched kingdoms burn and sprout again like weeds. You've seen Ragnar's sons chase legacy, revenge, and each other into the ground. But now, you're watching something far quieter. Assimilation. It starts with the little things. A Viking boy with a Saxon name. A Christian monk who blesses his bread with both the sign of the cross and a nod to Thor. Markets where runes and Latin script appear side by side. The once sharp line between conqueror and conquered is fading. One marriage, one trade, one reluctant handshake at a time. You live now in a settlement near the borderlands, part Danelaw, part Wessex. No one's quite sure who governs it, but they all agree that peace is tolerable, maybe even desirable. You help organize the harvest, teach young warriors how to hold a shield, and sometimes, only sometimes, you tell stories of Ivor and Born around the fire. But you leave things out. You don't mention the Blood Eagle, or how Sigurd's body was never found, or the way Vitsirk once walked into a burning church just to see how it felt. Those parts don't help children sleep. And besides, they wouldn't understand what war does to a person. One day you receive a message. Not from Alfred. He's too busy codifying laws and training priests, but from one of his men. An offer. Land. In exchange for peace. And taxes. At first, it feels absurd. You fought wars for freedom, didn't you? For glory? For Ragnar? But you're tired. The sword in your hand is lighter than it used to be. Not because you've grown stronger, but because you've used it too long. You accept. And so do others. Soon, the rough outlines of a shared England begin to form. A place where Norse and Saxon blood mix in the soil, and the battles are waged in courts and churches rather than fields. There's still resistance. A group of holdouts led by a fiery, one-eyed warrior who swears he's Ragnar's lost cousin refuse to settle. They vanish into the forest, raiding from time to time, but their cause is doomed. Too little, too late. The fire has cooled. You travel to Winchester, once Alfred's capital. It's clean, stern, and humming with energy. You walk the streets in your old tunic, people giving you sideways glances, unsure whether you're a relic or a threat. At the edge of a churchyard, you see a young monk sketching something into a wax tablet, a map. He catches your gaze. You were part of the Great Army, weren't you? You pause. Yes. You say, why did you come? Because of a man named Ragnar. He nods slowly. We're learning about him. They say he was half myth. You smile. That's not wrong. You think about that for days. Ragnar as myth, his sons as symbols, and you a living fossil walking among new roots, wondering what it all meant. Historians still argue whether the Great Heathen Army intended long-term conquest or just large-scale plunder. Some say they were invaders, others settlers. The truth, you suspect, is somewhere in between. Men rarely know what they're building until long after the hammers stop ringing. Back in your village, a girl carves a horse from driftwood. She hums a tune you don't recognize. When you ask what it is, she says, just something my mother made up. But you recognize the rhythm. It's almost the song the skalds used to sing about. Ragnar. Things survive. Quietly. In stories, in carvings, in habits. You spend your days now planting more than burning. You mend fences instead of breaking walls. And at night, when the wind whistles through the trees, you sometimes whisper old names into the dark.bjorn.sigurd.hv. It's erk.ivor.father.and. Somewhere you imagine them hearing you just once more. There's a kind of peace that feels like surrender, and another kind that feels like growth. You're still not sure which one you've found. Years have passed. Not that you count them anymore. Time doesn't move the way it used to, not in war. Camps or burning villages, but in seasons. Wheat fields rise and fall. Children you once carried on your shoulders now carry plows. The stories of Ragnar's sons have begun to fade from daily speech, but you still catch echoes when you least expect it. A boy names his dog Bjorn. A farmer paints snake eyes on the side of his ox cart. A silent nod to Sigurd. At the market, you hear a toddler mutter, boneless, as he limps across the stones in pretend play. No one corrects him, because the stories live on, even if the men are gone. One afternoon, a group of royal riders arrive in your village. The lead one, a Saxon noble with a polished sword and a scroll, reads aloud a new decree. Alfred, now older, wearier, and ever calculating, has signed another treaty. A final adjustment of Danelaw borders, more lands absorbed into Wessex. More oaths of peace, more taxation, more balance. No one argues. You sign your name with a shaky rune, next to the Christian crosses others have scratched into the parchment. The lines between Norse and Saxon, once carved in steel, are now written in ink, but still. Something inside you tightens. You walk the fields that night, past rows of barley and nettles, and wonder, what would Ragnar say if he saw this? Would he scoff at the compromise? Or would he smile at the endurance? Historians still argue whether the Danelaw was a Viking failure or a diplomatic victory. Some say it diluted Norse culture. Others call it proof of the Vikings' flexibility and pragmatism. You don't have the answer. You only know this. It changed everything. And then one morning, you hear bells, not church bells, warning bells. A messenger arrives. New ships on the coast, not traders, raiders from the east. Young Danes, men who've heard the old stories and want to live them. They wear the wolfskin cloaks, wield war axes, and shout battle cries that feel like echoes from your own youth. You're asked to help. Not to fight them. You ride out, slow and creaky in your joints, to where the new warriors have camped outside a trembling village. They're lean, hungry, and furious that there's nothing worth stealing. You approach, alone. They pause. One steps forward. A leader, maybe 17 years old, with a blood-stained tunic and a hammer tattoo on his throat. Who are you supposed to be? He sneers. You shrug. Someone who's already done this. He laughs. They say you marched with Ragnar's sons. You nod. They say you burned kings alive. You nod again. They say you took this land. A beat. Then you answer, and then we stayed. He looks puzzled, like he expected a challenge, not an invitation. You walk through their camp, telling stories, not the glorious ones, the real ones, about frostbite, betrayals, graves that never got names, eyes that never closed again. You don't preach. You just share. By dawn, most of them are gone. Scattered, confused, A few stay behind, asking for work. That night, you realize something profound. You are no longer part of the Viking invasion. You are the memory of it. A living bridge between rage and reason. Between old gods and new laws. Between Ragnar and Alfred. Your neighbors still call you the Old Warrior. Though most don't remember what you fought for. Some think you came from Francia. Others believe you're Saxon with a fancy accent. Only a few of the oldest still whisper your true origin. You don't correct them. Because what matters now isn't who you were. It's what the world has become. And the world is learning to live with itself. The days are shorter now. You wake to gray skies, eat quiet meals, and walk slow paths through the village. Some mornings you stretch your arms and feel not soreness, but space, the kind that settles inside you after years of carrying something heavy, the weight of war, of memory, of names long gone. It's lighter now. Children run past you without a second glance. They don't ask about Ivor. They don't chant songs about Bourne. Their games are about kings and castles, not longships and fire. You watch a boy chase another with a stick and shout, "I'm Alfred," like it's something to be proud of. That stings. Just a little, but you let it go, because you know what they don't. Alfred won. Not in battle, at least not always, but in patience, in building, in waiting, in crafting a story just as powerful as Ragnar's, only quieter. Less blood, more ink. You help rebuild the old hall this season. It's the third time you've patched that roof. The thatch has gotten thicker, the beams stronger. Maybe that's the point. Empires don't last because of their kings. They last because someone keeps fixing the roof. Inside, a monk teaches children to read. He asks you to speak once to tell the story of the Great Heathen Army. You oblige. Sitting before a half circle of muddy boots and wide eyes, you begin with Ragnar. Not the myths, the man. His curiosity, his wit, his failures, then the sons. Their fire, their hunger, their unraveling. You speak gently, choosing words like you're laying stones in a path. You do not dramatize. You do not glorify. You remember. And when you finish, a small voice asks, "Did you miss them?" You look out the window toward the old burial hill on the edge of town. The moss has overtaken the stones now. Crows perch where warriors once stood. Yes, you say. Every day. Historians still argue what became of the final pockets of Viking resistance. Some say they were absorbed. Others say they fled. There are tales of a rogue fleet that vanished into the Western Sea. One chronicle claims a descendant of Vidsirk returned decades later to fight in Ireland. But for you, it's simpler. The army faded like fog. You find comfort in small things now. In the feel of dirt under your nails. In the soft clack of weaving. Looms. In the way bread rises in the morning heat. War made you hard. Peace makes you quiet. And that quiet has a rhythm of its own. Once, late at night, a group of travelers stays at your village. One of them, a grizzled mercenary from the north, recognizes your eyes. "You fought at Ashdown," he whispers. You nod. He pauses. "You lost." You nod again, and the man just smiles. "Still here, though, aren't you?" Still here. The wind shifts as winter approaches. The geese fly low. The village stores grain in old Roman urns, passed down from hands that predate you by centuries. Even the tools you use to build axes, plows, saws carry traces of both Viking iron and Saxon form. The fusion is complete now. No more one or the other. Just this: your neighbors speak in a muddled language, half Norse, half Old English. You catch phrases like Thor's mercy beside by God's grace. No one thinks twice, and you sit by the fire at night, carving runes into a walking stick, not for magic, not for power, just habit. You run your fingers over each letter, each groove, like prayer dot, then you whisper a name, just one, and in the silence that follows, you almost believe someone hears it. The frost doesn't bite the way it used to. Maybe that's because you don't fight through it anymore. No more winter campaigns. No more sleeping on frozen ground, armor stiff with ice, blood drying on your fingers before you even wipe your blade. Now, winter means extra firewood, soup that simmers, blankets thick as shields. You live in a cottage now, modest, sturdy, built with hands that once tore down walls. Children pass it on their way to school, where they learn the names of kings you've met and the dates of battles you barely survived. One boy says, "My teacher says you were a raider." You just smile. "I was a builder," you say, and he shrugs. Same thing, I guess. You laugh harder than you should. A nearby village holds a harvest festival every year now. The first time you're invited, you refuse. Too many people, too much noise. But the second year, you go. Someone offers you a crown made of woven straw. A girl paints a snake on your hand. They call you the old story man. You don't correct them, because maybe that's what you are now. The festival includes both a Norse sun blessing and a Christian hymn. Nobody flinches. No one argues. They drink mead from clay mugs and dance around a fire built in the shape of a longship. It burns bright, then low, then to embers. You stand by the edge, warmed by the glow dot, not just on your skin, but somewhere deeper. Later, walking home through the dark, you hear a low voice call your name. No one's there. Just wind, just branches, creaking, but you pause anyway. You whisper back, "Still here." There's a stone in your garden, just one, round and smooth. No inscription. It sits beneath a tree that drops red leaves like little bloodstains each autumn. You find yourself talking to it sometimes. Out loud, not because you expect an answer, but because you like the way the air still listens. Historians still argue whether the Great Heathen Army was a triumph or a tragedy, whether Ragnar's sons were heroes, war criminals, or both, whether Ivar was a tactical genius or simply a broken boy who never recovered from watching his father die. But you remember the sound of axes striking shields in the cold before dawn. You remember Sigurd's quiet loyalty, Hvitserk's fevered courage, Bjorn's roar, and Ivar's terrible stillness. You remember that none of them truly won, and none of them truly lost, because the war didn't end in fire, it ended in fields, in settlements, in children who grow up not knowing which god rules the sky, only that the rain falls on all of them equally. One day, someone delivers a new copy of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. You flip through it out of habit, not interest. Then, tucked into the corner of a page, you find a line. A great host came from the north, and it left ashes and oaths in its wake. That's it. One line. You close the book and nod, because maybe that's all history really needs. Not a saga, not a monument. Just a few words carved into time, pointing toward everything you lived and everything you lost. That night, you dream of a long ship cutting through mist. You're not on it. You're watching it from the shore, and for the first time in a long, long while. You don't want to go. The last leaves fall without fanfare. They drift lazily through the chilled air, curl against the ground, and become part of it. You watch them from your stool, wrapped in wool, hands folded, eyes still clear. The world turns softly now, not with the roar of war drums, but with the hush of memory. Your bones ache more than usual. Every movement carries the weight of old wounds, some physical, some less so. You don't mind. You've lived more lives than most. Warrior, settler, builder, memory keeper. And now, witness. Each morning begins with ritual. Light the fire, stir the porridge, feed the birds that peck near the steps. Each movement connects you to a rhythm older than even Ragnar. You are not creating legend anymore. You are becoming part of its soil. Down the hill, the church bell rings. The monks sing in Old English with Latin rhythm. You hum along without thinking, even though once their prayers were your enemy's words. That's the irony. Everything that was foreign has become familiar. The names, the gods, the language. You hear a young voice call for you from the gate. A boy no more than 10 with sun-browned skin and a makeshift wooden sword. "Tell me about the army," he says. You nod slowly. You don't stand up. Just motion for him to sit beside you. Which part? He thinks. The best part. You glance at the tree. Its branches bare now, reaching toward a sky the color of cold iron. The part where we stopped, you say. He blinks. That's the best. You smile, because it meant we survived. He nods like he understands, though you know he doesn't. Not yet. But one day, he will. The village continues without you most days. That's how it should be. You've become part of the background, like the hills, the sky, the stone path worn smooth by hundreds of passing feet. People greet you with nods, not questions. They know who you are, even if they don't remember why. Your hands shake more now, so you write less, carve less. But you still speak to children, to trees, to the fire, to no one. The final time you walk to the burial hill, the breeze is soft. The stones are worn. Ivor's grave is half swallowed by grass. The child sledding there last winter now walks beside you, holding your arm. You point out the old mounds. We thought we were gods, you whisper. Were you? You smile. For a little while. He nods, then runs ahead. You stay a little longer. Let your eyes close. Let the wind wrap around you. Let the weight of swords, ships, brothers, and fire settle into the ground beneath your feet. The army is gone, but the story, your story, drifts forward, carried in whispers, in songs, in names, scratched into stones by hands that no longer remember the faces behind them. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the victory. And now, as the firelight dims and the room softens into shadow, let yourself drift a little slower. Breathe deeper. Feel the stillness settle around you like the hush after snow has fallen, blanketing the past in quiet, cool grace. You've traveled far tonight, from the blood-soaked fields of Northumbria to the silent stones of Forgotten. Graves. You've walked beside the sons of Ragnar, heard their laughter and fury, watched their rise and their quiet unraveling. And through it all, you stood witness, not to gods, not to monsters, but to men flawed, brilliant, broken men chasing something they couldn't always name. And isn't that just like life? A slow pursuit of meaning, marked not by the loudest moments, but by the ones we carry in silence. The ones that change us without permission, that settle into our bones. So now, as the night wraps gently around your shoulders and your breath begins to slow, let yourself imagine the longship finally pulling into harbor, the oars resting, the voices fading, and your feet finally touching quiet ground. You're safe now. There are no more battles tonight, only rest, only the soft rhythm of time folding in around you like a warm cloak. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it.